Welcome to the 11th edition of Before the Battle. My name is Nick Baldwin. I'm your host as always, and joining me on the panel as always is the man behind BestFightPicks.com. Please welcome Daniel Levy back to the show. Daniel, how's it going?
It's going great, man, and it's good to be back on Before the Battle. How are you doing, Nick?
Not too bad at all, and glad to have you on the show, of course. And returning to the show, he went on hiatus for a little bit, is Paolo of Sportsnet.ca and today's knockout. Paolo, thanks again for coming on. How's it going?
What's up, Daniel? I mean, Nick. I'm just kidding. Yeah, I'm good. It's good to be back. It's good to have internet connection. First world problems, but I'm happy to be back. Thanks for having me back, Nick.
Exactly. I remember you telling me in text or whatever that Wi-Fi is almost more important than water, and nowadays it's close. It's close, but all right, so we have UFC Fight Night 75, aka UFC Japan, from the Super Saitama Arena tomorrow night, and it's a fun card. It's not a stacked card at all, but there are some intriguing matchups that I'm kind of excited to talk about, but it's not like your UFC 189, anything like that, but should be a fun show. But before we get to that, I just want to talk about one little piece of news quickly, and that is Lyoto Machida wanting to take on Michael Bisping later next year, early next year that is, and one potential card that could be on is the UFC London card in February. Obviously, that makes sense for a perfect fight night headliner, maybe a Fox card, whatever. So Daniel, just overall, what are your thoughts on a possible matchup between Machida and Michael Bisping?
I mean, it's cool, but I don't think it's going to happen. I think what's going to happen is Anderson Silva versus Michael Bisping in April.
And Paulo, do you think Bisping-Machida happens? And would you rather the Machida fight or the Anderson fight?
And you know what? I'd honestly see, even though it probably won't happen, Anderson Silva versus Lyoto Machida. Now, you know that's a fight everyone would really want to see. That could headline a pay-per-view right there. But that's not going to happen, so I agree with Daniel. I think what's going to happen is Anderson Silva versus Mike Bisping. And Machida, you know what? He's not going to be fighting for a title. Why not give him some fun novelty fights? Well, why not Machida versus Rampage 2 or Machida versus Shogun 3? Complete the trilogy, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do like all three of those matchups. Really, you take those three fighters, and all three of them are really good fights. I tune into all three of them, of course. But I do think the one that probably will happen is actually Anderson Silva versus Michael Bisping. And it was a little odd because earlier yesterday, Anderson Silva, I believe, tweeted out or somewhere on social media said that he's possibly fighting Bisping. And then Bisping goes and says, this is the first thing I've heard of it. So it doesn't look like this matchup is set at all. It's like kind of just a rumor right now. But if it happens, great. If the Machida fight happens, great as well. I really would watch either of them. I really like to see either fight. So let's move on to the Japan card, and we'll just go through the main card, then talk about some prelim fights and whatnot. So we have, and excuse my pronunciation, I don't have the best. We all know that, and it's a Japan card, so it's not going to be too pretty, but I'll try. So we have Masuto Hirota taking on, I'm just going to say Teru, because this guy, I actually know him kind of well. These guys, I believe, are the finalists on Road to Japan. I'm kind of hoping none of us watched that, because that'd be kind of bad if we did, just because.
I watched it.
Really? Well, you're from the Philippines. I understand that. But, Daniel, if you watch that, that's a different story. Anyways, though, the matchup, Daniel, these guys aren't really too known. One guy's a veteran, one guy's a newcomer. Who do you like in this matchup, Daniel?
Yeah, you know, like you mentioned with Mizuto Hirota, he is that old school kind of guy, and Ishinhara is the new school. And you know, normally I do favor the new school, and I think with Mizuto Hirota, you know, he's had his chance. He's been in the UFC before. He's fought the big names. He's been in there with Eddie Alvarez, with Shinya Aoki, with Hani Yaya. But I'm gonna favor the younger guy in Ishinhara to get the victory here. So I think he's gonna go out there and win the Road to UFC Japan.
And Apollo, who are you picking to take home the Road to Japan championship, I guess you could say?
You know what? I really want Ishihara Yashabo to win, because think about it. Hirota is 0-3 under Zuffa. He lost to like Pat Healy, and he lost to Rodrigo Dam. What a lot of people know, Rodrigo Dam was like a guy that everybody every known notable fighter beat. So if you lost to Rodrigo Dam, then that definitely means you're not UFC caliber. So what would that say about UFC Road to Japan if he's the winner of that entire tournament that they got going on? It's definitely an indictment on Japanese MMA. So I really want to see Yashabo, aka Ishihara, win, but I just don't see it. I think he's undersized. I don't think he has the power to keep Hirota honest, and I think Hirota's gonna grind him out to a boring 30-27, 29-28 decision. As much as I hate to say it, I got Hirota on this one.
Now I'm actually siding with Teru here, and simply because he's a younger fighter. And he's actually training over at Team Alpha Male, which is one of the best gyms in the entire world. So if you're training at Team Alpha Male, you're an unknown guy. I don't know about you guys, but I think you have to get better every single day. You're training with the best of the best, TJ Dillashaw, Uriah Faber, Chad Mendes, and so on. You can't not get better when you're training at Team Alpha Male. Hirota, he's a veteran, of course. I don't know where he's training or anything. I kind of doubt a gym such as Team Alpha Male or whatnot. Ishihara, aka Teru, the UFC kind of messed up the math here. It says 75% of his wins were completed by TKO or KO, and then 50 by decision. So maybe UFC needs to go back to grade 5 math or something like that. But the main point is True finishes fights, and I actually think he's going to finish the veteran in this matchup. Moving on, we have Katsunori Kakuno taking on Diego Brandao, and this is a very intriguing matchup in my opinion. I'm looking forward to it. So, Apollo, who do you like in this matchup?
Oh, I really like Kikuno here. I mentioned I really what's it called? I'm really on the minority here picking Kikuno because logic dictates that Brandao is gonna aggressively attack him. He's probably not gonna knock him out because Brandao, he does have some power, but not enough to knock one-punch knockout guys. But I think he's gonna pressure him enough that he's gonna make Kikuno panic. He's gonna go for an ill-advised takedown and get submitted because Brandao's a really slick BJJ guy. But I don't know. It's just a part of me just can't pick Brandao right now, even if he looks good at the weigh-in. I think Kikuno gets a little bit better when he's fighting in Japan, and he's that type of unpredictable fighter. He could counter-strike Brandao to a 29-28 decision win. Maybe even finish him. Who knows? Maybe I'm going crazy, but I got Kikuno winning here.
All right, Daniel, Kikuno or Brandao?
You know, Nick, I'm on the total opposite end here. I got Diego Brandao all day. You know, with Kikuno, yeah, he's a lot of fun to watch, but he's one of these guys that puts his hands down at his waist and his chin up in the air. And I'm not talking about like an Anderson Silva, you know, who keeps his hands down by his waist, because Kikuno doesn't move his head off that center line. You know, he's not very dynamic like Anderson at all. He just kind of he looks kind of funny when he's fighting, and you know, he's not on the Japanese local circuit anymore. He's in the UFC, and he's taking on the Ultimate Fighter winner and Diego Brandao, and I think Brandao is going to go out there and knock him out.
Yeah, I really like Diego Brandao here by knockout, actually. Katsunori Kikuno, yes, his last couple fights, he's lost by knockout, but he's lost to very top fighters. Tony Ferguson, who's currently ranked near the top 5, probably for sure top 10, I know, right around 6 or 7 or 8, right around there. Kevin Souza, on the other hand, he isn't ranked, he isn't too well known, but this guy is legit. He's going to be a top 10 fighter, and maybe even top 5 in the future, in the near future. Katsunori Kikuno, he does win fights. Like we saw against San Cecilia, he locked up that submission. Diego Brandao, he is a good first-round fighter, a great first-round fighter, and I'm leaning towards him by knockout in the first round. But if Kikuno somehow maybe changes his stance and actually protects his face, maybe he can protect his face for 5 rounds, make it a second, and lock up some submission when Brandao is gassed or whatever. But I'm going to assume he's not going to change like that, and Brandao, I think, is going to knock him out in the first round. But, like, it's kind of a lock, but, of course, you always have that chance that Brandao gasses, and then Kikuno locks up the submission. But final pick is Diego Brandao by knockout. All right, we have a bantamweight matchup between Takeya Mizugaki and George Roop. So Daniel, who do you like in this 135-pound matchup?
You know, it's funny. One thing I've been talking about all week is how just because you're Japanese fighting in Japan doesn't mean you're automatically going to win that judge's decision. You know, obviously you recall Takeya Mizugaki versus Chris Carriaso. We all thought that Mizugaki won that fight, and they gave it to Carriaso. This was in Japan, and another example consists of Takanori Gomi versus Diego Sanchez. We all thought that Gomi won the fight, and they gave it to Sanchez, and this was in Japan as well. So I'm not convinced that Mizugaki can win a BS decision here. I think that he actually has to earn it if he wants to win it. And the thing with Roop is he only loses to guys that have that one-punch knockout power. But, man, I don't think Mizugaki's got that one-punch knockout power. So I'm actually going to go with the dog here. I'm going to go out on a limb and pick George Roop.
Interesting, interesting. And Apollo, who are you siding with in this bantamweight matchup?
No, I agree with a lot of Daniel's points. And I already bet on Mizugaki, so I'm going to side with Mizugaki just so I can convince myself he's really going to win. But what I noticed about Mizugaki is he's a really great fighter. He's very technical. He can wrestle. He's tough. Well, he was tough. He's got some pretty good boxing. But the thing about Mizugaki is he doesn't have finishing power, and he always gets into close decisions with guys who aren't in the top 10. If he fights a top 10 guy, he's going to lose. He lost to Faber. He got destroyed by Cruz, and he got destroyed by Sterling. And the thing is, Roop is a veteran just like Mizugaki, and they've both been taking so much damage. So you can, but I think Roop is just so shot as a fighter. I think he's just watching his fights. It's so brutal. He always gets the crap beat out of him, and he beat Brian Bowles because he caught Brian Bowles on a punch, and Bowles basically quit. But in that first round, Bowles was lighting him up, man. I thought Bowles was just gonna crush him. And he's been on a bit of and Rob Font knocked him out recently. So it's a little bit hard to side with George Roop, who's been getting beat up a lot. But, it's Mizugaki. Mizugaki doesn't really knock anyone out. So I'm still going to side with Mizugaki to win a 29-28 decision. But if George Roop wins, I'm not going to be at all surprised.
The way I look at this matchup is Mizugaki. In my eyes, he is a top 10 guy. Yes, he's coming off brutal losses to Dominic Cruz and Aljamain Sterling, but Dominic Cruz is arguably the best bantamweight in the world. Aljamain Sterling is probably a future champion, if not champion, definitely a top contender. He's already top contender, and he's still pretty young. There's no shame at all losing to Dominic Cruz and Aljamain Sterling. On the other hand, George Roop, he's basically done. I'm sorry, but Takeya Mizugaki should relatively easily beat George Roop. And George Roop, though he is coming off that knockout loss to Rob Font, that was back in summer of 2014. He's had over a year to improve his game, to recover, of course, and maybe this long layoff, is good for him. Most of the time, I don't like to side with guys coming off a year or even 2 years layoff just because I don't know how they'll look. Maybe they'll look fantastic. Maybe they'll look really bad. In this case, I think this layoff might have been good for Roop, but I'm still going to side with Takeya Mizugaki to probably win a decision. All right, moving on, we have a pivotal flyweight matchup between Kyoji Horiguchi, who's coming off that brutal loss to Demetrius Johnson back in April, and Chico Camus, who recently lost to Henry Cejudo. Daniel, who do you like in this flyweight matchup?
I think that Chico Camus is constantly underrated, and I think that Kyoji Horiguchi is constantly overrated. Horiguchi is currently ranked number 7 in the world, and I completely disagree with that. I mean, the guy's got wins over Luis Gaudino, Dustin Page, and De Los Reyes. I got a lot of respect for De Los Reyes, but I mean, that doesn't make you a top 7 guy on the planet. And when you talk about Chico Camus, since he dropped to flyweight, this guy's been a stud. He goes out there, easily outpoints Brad Pickett, and if you saw Brad Pickett's last fight, he dropped Tomas Almeida twice, in that fight. And you don't just simply drop Tomas Almeida 2 times in a fight. And I think that Chico Camus is going to get the upset here. I consider this fight to be a pick'em, and whenever I see a plus 325 underdog in what I consider to be a pick'em fight, I always go with the dog. So I got Chico Camus for the upset here.
And Apollo, what about you?
Yeah, I'm with Daniel here all the time. At first, when I first saw this, I'm like, oh, they're feeding Kyoji Horiguchi here. Because if you look at the rankings, Kyoji Horiguchi is number 7 or something like that? Yeah. And Chico Camus is outside the top 15. And Kyoji Horiguchi just fought in a contender fight, so they want to like get him back in that. But if you look at it even more, Kyoji Horiguchi, his finishing power is overrated. I mean, this guy, he does have power and he's very athletic for a Japanese fighter, but he's very tentative. I mean, when I see this guy throw combinations, he throws them so well. He throws a couple of punches, then he throws a kick, and he does it so smoothly that the opponent can't even see it coming. I mean, he was lining up Luis Gaudino, but the thing that's a problem with Kyoji Horiguchi is, in my opinion, is he doesn't have the killer instinct. Even when he has guys hurt, with the exception of John De Los Reyes, he doesn't go in for the kill. He doesn't go in there and just like put in the string of combinations that'll finish them. And that's a problem when you're against Chico Camus, because Chico Camus, he moves relatively well. He's really fast. And I think ever since he got back to Rufus Sport after being kicked out, he's had this renewed confidence and this renewed fighting spirit. And he did really well against Cejudo. I mean, losing to Cejudo, that's not a shame. Cejudo's like an undefeated guy. He's a Golden Gloves boxer. He's a gold medalist Olympian. And Cejudo couldn't take him down. That was actually a really crappy performance from Cejudo, and goes to show how good Chico Camus performed. So the way I see it, Kyoji Horiguchi is going to be in tough here, and it might be a really close decision. And I'm really going to side with the dog here if it's going to be a close decision. At 4-1, 3-1 odds, Chico Camus. Chico Camus all the way.
All right, now this is a very interesting matchup, and the odds are heavy in favor of Kyoji Horiguchi, which I don't completely agree, but he definitely should be favored in this matchup. I am picking Horiguchi to win, and the thing with Chico Camus is, yes, he looked good against Henry Cejudo. Obviously lost that fight, of course, no question about it. But he did look good against Cejudo, who could be in line for a title shot within 6 or 7 months or so, assuming if he beats Jesse Formiga, of course, in November. Chico Camus, I actually scored his fight with Brad Pickett. It was a very close fight, split decision or whatnot, but I actually thought Pickett should have won that fight, just barely. So I can't really say I was impressed with him in that matchup, but I do think flyweight is the division he should be at. Of course, at bantamweight he was fairly small. Definitely moving down to flyweight was the right option for him. But Kyoji Horiguchi, I kind of think people are overlooking him here, just because he's coming off that brutal loss to the champ, Demetrius Johnson. I'm not saying you guys just watched the DJ fight and said, oh, this guy sucks. He just got dominated. So Chico Camus all the way. I know you guys watch other fights, multiple other fights, of course, but I just have a feeling Kyoji Horiguchi is going to be motivated to come back and come back strong, even better than he was, and beat Chico Camus. Kyoji Horiguchi was a guy that was considered a top prospect in flyweight division, rushed into a title shot that, of course, he wasn't going to win. Like, we all knew Johnson was going to either win a 50-45 decision or, of course, a literally last-second submission. Anyways, I got to go with Kyoji Horiguchi. I think he grinds out a decision, probably on the feet. Chico Camus is very tough. He has a decent chin, so I don't think he's going to get knocked out. But I do like Kyoji Horiguchi to take home a close decision. All right, we have the co-main event of the evening. We have top middleweight contender Gegard Mousasi taking on short notice replacement Uriah Hall. Now, Daniel, who do you like in this middleweight fight?
You know, conventional wisdom would tell you that Gegard Mousasi is going to win this fight because the guy's got all the experience in the world, and he usually wins these kind of fights. But, you know, it would be cool to see Uriah Hall go out there and get over that hump. And the reason I'd like to see him win is because, like I mentioned, man, you know, Mousasi, he's had all the success. You know, he's got wins over Dan Henderson, over Jacare, over Mark Hunt. He's got the big names under his belt. But Uriah Hall, he hasn't had the same success. So I'd like to see him, you know, go out there and get a victory here. But I got to favor Mousasi, but I'm rooting for Hall.
All right, Paolo, who do you like in this pivotal middleweight matchup?
I'm going to have to go with Mousasi here just because I think he has more ways to win. But you know what? It's crazy because he's 5-1 favorite and the number keeps rising. And everyone knows that Gegard Mousasi, that guy can sometimes not show up. Everyone keeps saying Uriah Hall is this guy who never shows up, he never shows up, he never shows up. But there's been a couple of times where Gegard Mousasi has even criticized himself and said, oh yeah, I feel burnt out, I feel like my cardio wasn't on point, I feel like, like a little bit of excuses there. So what happens if poor version of Gegard Mousasi shows up against Uriah Hall, right? I mean, you can't underestimate someone like Uriah Hall. This guy is the physical specimen of a mixed martial artist. He's long, he's athletic, he's fast, he's strong, and the only problem with him is his mental game. And I've been hearing around Twitter that Uriah Hall has sort of like reinvigorated himself. He's sort of developed this new mindset that he's coming in there more energized. He's putting less pressure on himself to win. And he's coming in here as a huge underdog. I think this is the biggest I've seen Uriah Hall as an underdog in the UFC. And that might mean something. So he's going to come in there with nothing to lose, and maybe we'll see the best Uriah Hall. But with all of that said, I still think Gegard Mousasi has all the right tools to win. If he's not going to strike with Uriah Hall, he's going to blanket him and win a 30-27 decision. It might actually be a little bit more boring than it sounds on paper, but Mousasi's the pick.
All right, now Mousasi, this guy only shows up 50% of the time, but then Uriah Hall only shows up 50% of the time. So who the hell knows what version of each fighter we're going to see? Usually it's like Uriah Hall versus whoever. The other guy shows up all the time. He's a fighter. He shows up, of course. Uriah Hall, on the other hand, doesn't all the time, so I'm going with the other guy. But this case, both these guys don't always show up at their full potential. Gegard Mousasi, though, is on another level than Uriah Hall. It's pretty simple. Gegard Mousasi should be able to grind out a decision win. I'm fairly confident in him doing so, even if a fairly poor Gegard Mousasi shows up against a very good Uriah Hall. I do think Mousasi still has the advantage. Yes, Uriah Hall can go out there and knock him out, but Mousasi, as far as I know, he has a decent chin. I don't see him getting knocked out. Uriah Hall, he could shock me. He could win a decision, grind out a decision. But Gegard Mousasi is a guy that he doesn't beat the top 3, the top 4, the top 5, but he does beat everyone else. He's number 6 in the division for a reason. He's a very good fighter. He just cannot beat the Chris Weidmans, the Luke Rockholds, the Jacques Reyes, the Yoel Romeros, and so on. But he can beat the guys below him. Even top 10 guys he can beat. He's a very skilled athlete. Uriah Hall is kind of wasted talent, in my opinion. I think he really could be a great fighter, but he just has not lived up to his full potential. I got to base my pick on what I see, and I see Gegard Mousasi is overall always better than Uriah Hall, so for that reason, I got Mousasi by decision. Alright, we have the main event of the evening, and it's a heavyweight matchup between Josh Barnett, who's returning after almost a 2-year layoff, against Roy Big Country Nelson. Now, this is a very interesting matchup. So, Daniel, who do you like in this heavyweight fight?
You know, it's funny, Nick, because all week I've been saying that Josh Barnett's going to go out there and ragdoll Roy Nelson, but then I watched the film and I got a very different opinion. I think that Roy Nelson's going to go out there and land the one tool he has, that big overhand right. I think he's going to land it and knock out Josh Barnett. So, yeah, I do have Big Country Nelson finally getting back on track with a big victory.
Now, is your pick anything based off of possibly Josh Barnett maybe not returning at his full potential, or is it just that you think Roy Nelson will land that lucky punch and, yeah?
Nick, I think it's a little bit of both. I think that anytime you got a guy that, 2 years ago, he got absolutely obliterated, and it wasn't kind of like, oh, he got caught, it happens to the best of us. It was like he got his takedown stuffed, and he got destroyed in every area of the game. He got completely dominated and completely destroyed. And, I think that what's going to happen here is that Big Country is going to be able to set up the right hand and knock him out.
All right, Paolo, who do you like in this heavyweight matchup, Roy Nelson or Josh Barnett?
I'm going to have to completely disagree with Daniel here. Although I do agree that the Roy Nelson overhand right of death is something that can definitely deter me from betting any Roy Nelson fights unless I'm betting on Roy Nelson. But from what I see, Roy Nelson hasn't knocked out any top 10 heavyweights. I mean, which top 10 heavyweight has Roy Nelson knocked out? I mean, is Dave Pee-wee Herman a top 10 heavyweight? Oh, Big Nog. Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, Big Nog, who hasn't been too good lately. But, oh, yeah, I guess I'll give him that. Okay? But, no, I think Josh Barnett, I mean, Nate Miller said it on Half the Battle, which we recorded earlier, that Josh Barnett is called the War Master because he is a strategist. And this guy that just covers every part of the fighting game. I think he's just a better guy overall. I think he's gonna find a strategy to keep Roy Nelson at bay, grind him out, and maybe get a late finish. I really like Josh Barnett. Seeing him coach in Road to Japan, I really saw how much of a smart guy he is. He's just this really good, smart, intuitive guy who really knows the fighting game all around. Now just because you're the smarter guy doesn't mean you're gonna win the fight, but but the most important thing for me is that Josh Barnett has taken a bit of a layoff. He's let his body rest a bit, and for older guys, that could be a bit of a benefit. You're not taking as much damage to your brain. Your body is healing a little bit better. Maybe you could perform a little bit better that way. And Roy Nelson's the opposite. He's been getting battered in his last few fights, so I think Barnett's going to be the fresher fighter. And if Roy Nelson doesn't land an overhand right early, I think Barnett's going to win the fight.
All right, now this is a very, very close fight. Like earlier, initially I was picking Barnett all the way, probably to stop Big Country. Then I was deciding, okay, maybe Roy Nelson can land the bomb. And days ago, I'm like, no, Barnett, maybe Barnett will win. We just lost Paolo there, but I'll keep going on with my breakdown of the fight. Anyway, so now I'm siding with Roy Nelson, and the reason I'm siding with Big Country is there's definitely many factors in favor of each of them and against them. Josh Barnett, he's coming off this 2-year layoff, basically. 2-year layoff, I'll call it. But he hasn't been sitting on his couch eating potato chips for the last 2 years. He's been competing in Metamoris matches. He's the quote-unquote heavyweight champion of Metamoris. He has been active, just not in the octagon. He has been doing a lot of grappling and whatnot. So and I should mention at the weigh-ins earlier, when I tuned into the weigh-ins after Joe Warren dominated LC Davis in Bellator, he looked really, really, really good at the weigh-ins. Now, of course, there's a quote-unquote PED usage possibility. He's popped for steroids in the past. That could be the case, but I'm not the one to say that. I have really no idea. I don't know Josh Barnett personally, anything like that. And it's not like he looks like he's on PEDs or anything. It's just that he's a lot more in shape than he usually is. With that, I do think Barnett has a very good chance. But I just got to go with Big Country. Something about it says he's going to land that big right hand and knock Josh Barnett out. One last thing I want to say is Josh Barnett, his chin is not as good, not nearly as good as Roy Nelson's is. Of course, Roy Nelson got knocked out by Mark Hunt, but Mark Hunt knocks out everyone. So there's no shame about that. That was only his second stoppage loss in his entire career. And it's kind of surprising that Roy Nelson is actually older than Barnett. But it all comes down to how is the layoff going to affect Barnett. And that's what we're going to find out on Saturday night. But I do think it's not going to affect him well. And I got Roy Nelson by knockout. Now, I don't know if Paolo's going to come back. Hopefully he will. Maybe he won't. But anyway, so shout out to Daniel's show, Half the Battle, of course. He usually does things like fight to watch and fighter to watch. But he forgot. Obviously, he had Nate Miller and Go Paolo on, who was just here, and now he's not. So definitely check that out after you're listening to this. Great show. A very fun show that is. And since they didn't do it, we're going to do it. Hopefully their listeners come over here, listen to that, and flip back and forth and whatnot. So, Daniel, who is your fight to watch on tomorrow's UFC Fight Night 75, a.k.a. UFC Japan?
So we're turning the tables a little bit, Nick. We're going to do Half the Battle special of the fighter to watch and the fight to watch. And my fight to watch for UFC Japan is Chico Camus versus Kyoji Horiguchi. I want to see, both these guys are rebounding off of losses, and the line is a little bit off for my liking. I consider this fight to be a pick'em. And when I see such a huge line, when I see a plus 325 on Chico Camus, when I consider it to be a pick'em, I got to go with the dog here, man. So my fight to watch is Chico Camus versus Kyoji Horiguchi.
I do like that fight to watch. Of course, I am picking Horiguchi. That will be an interesting fight, of course. Many factors, of course. Horiguchi coming off the first loss of his career, devastating loss. Chico Camus coming off the loss to Cejudo. Who will look better coming off the loss? It really all depends on that. then again, I do think that will be an interesting fight. Could be a very fun fight on the feet. We really don't know. Maybe Horiguchi can take him down, grind him out. I don't really think so, though. Camus defended most of Cejudo's takedowns, so I think he'll be able to do the same against Horiguchi. My fight to watch is I don't know. This is a tough one. There's nothing that actually like ridiculously stands out. I think Kakuno Brandao will be interesting because Kakuno did look really good at the weigh-ins, of course. I don't expect him to be a changed fighter. I do think Brandao is gonna knock him out pretty cleanly. So I guess you could say Brandao is my fight to watch, my fighter to watch. My fight to watch, I'll go with the main event, Barnett Nelson. It's kind of an easy pick here, main event, whatever. But there are factors, positive factors, negative factors against both guys. It should be a fun fight while it lasts. I got Big Country knocking him out early. But it will be interesting to see how Roy Nelson comes back from the Alistair Overeem loss. And, of course, Josh Barnett coming off the Travis Brown loss 2 years ago. And, of course, the layoff. So it will be an interesting fight. And so who is your fight to watch, Daniel? Or fighter?
My fighter to watch for UFC Japan is Sergeant Nick Hine. You know, I think that this guy, he's kind of on the precipice of hitting that top 15 status. And I think that with a victory here, he's going to let people know exactly what he's been working on in the past couple months at Tiger Muay Thai. And I think he's going to go out there and get that victory.
And Apollo, I see you're back. And right now we're doing fighter to watch and fight to watch. So, Apollo, who is your fight to watch pretty quickly?
My fight to watch is actually going to be in the actually, it's going to be Katsuyori Kakuno and Diego Brandao. You just never know what's going to happen in this fight. Come on, Diego Brandao, this guy goes in there, tries to finish a fight. He goes there swinging for the fences even though he's a BJJ specialist. So either way, he's probably going to get his first knockout beyond an ear injury, or he's going to sub Kikuno. And Kikuno, like, come on, this guy's like an anime character straight into the UFC. He goes in there, hands down, with a serial killer smile on his face, basically going in to punch him in the face. This fight can't be boring, man. I just can't see any scenario where they're gonna clinch up and put on the snooze fest. Either way, someone's gonna get finished here, or if not, they're both gonna hurt each other really badly. That it's gonna be so entertaining for every violence enthusiast out there.
All right, now who is your fighter to watch on this UFC Japan card?
Fighter to watch would probably be that's tough. There's like a couple of guys, but you know what? Let's give it to Chico Camus right here. You know what? I think Chico Camus I think Daniel mentioned that this guy's underrated. He's not getting mentioned a bit. And Kyoji Horiguchi is being deemed as like the messiah of Japanese MMA or something, because this guy is supposedly the best thing in Japan right now. Well, if Chico Camus comes out there and puts on a show and gives Kyoji Horiguchi a run for his money, you can definitely chalk it up to Chico Camus getting a little bit more props for that. But Chico Camus, watch out for this guy. He's a fun fighter to watch. The Rufus Sport product, really quick feet, good striker. He's gonna put in a show. Even if he missed weight, he's gonna put in a show. Just trust me on that.
Unless Gucci comes out and does what Gucci does, of course. Now, Daniel, Paulo, I hope you have your Kountermove teams ready. If not, we'll give you a second. Daniel, if you do, who are your 5 fighters on your Kountermove team?
My 5 fighters for my UFC Japan Kountermove team are Diego Brandao, Nick Hine, Chico Camus, Li Jingliang, and Roy Big Country Nelson.
And Apollo, if you have it up, who are your 5 fighters on your Kountermove team?
Okay, mine's a little, it's a little bit weird right now, but okay, I went with Roger Zapata, Viva Zapata. I got a Sergeant Nick Hine. I got Li Jingliang, a.k.a. the Dagestani of China. I got Jigard Musashi, and I got the other side of Diego Brandao. I got Katsunori serial killer face Kikuno.
All right, and my Kountermove team is, I actually have, I have 2, and one of them actually had Matt Hobart in it. Of course, I didn't edit that out yet, but my team is Roy Nelson to get the knockout win over Josh Barnett. I got Diego Brandao to KO Katsunori Kikuno, and I have a Jingling Lee to probably even finish whoever he's fighting. I got Nick Hine. To maybe finish the guy he's fighting. Let's see, Yasuki Kasuya. Okay, I got him to finish him, and And then I got my boy Teru to probably finish Misoto Hiroto. So I don't know. Maybe play my team. Probably don't because it'll probably suck. But we'll see what happens tomorrow night. Now, Daniel, Paolo, really want to thank you guys for both coming on the 11th edition of Before the Battle. Now, Daniel, as always, if you have anything to plug, of course, your website, your Twitter accounts, and anything else, now's your time.
Yeah, obviously the fans can follow me at Best Fight Picks on Twitter. You go to bestfightpicks.com, you type your email in that top right corner, and you get the Best Fight Picks and podcast delivered to your inbox every single fight week. And, this weekend coming up, I got Chaz the Scrapper Skelly live on Half the Battle. He's 14-1. He's a contender in the featherweight division. And this guy's taking on Kevin Souza in his next fight. So I'm going to talk to him all about that. I'm going to talk to him about that knee he landed on Mirsad Bektik. We're not going to discriminate. We're going to include the entire package. So I hope you guys tune in to Half the Battle.
Definitely looking forward to, of course, your interview with Chaz Skelly. Now, Paulo, where can we find your writing, your social media, and anything else you want to plug? Now's your time.
Okay, well, first and foremost, you guys can find me at GoPauloMMA on Twitter. I had this on right now, but for some reason it's not showing up. But yeah, at GoPauloMMA on Twitter. That's my MMA account. You can also find me at GoPaulo.com. That's my non-MMA account for my travel adventures and all that stuff. You can find a lot of my writing stuff from Sportsnet and from today's Knockout. Come check us out. I got 2 articles in the oven right now. I really don't know what they're going to be about, but they're going to be dropping sometime next week. And I actually got a podcast in the works right now. I'm not entirely sure what the podcast is going to cover, what we're going to angle on, but I'm talking to someone about this right now because she sort of recruited me into doing a podcast with her. But I'll have a little bit more of that maybe on the next episode of Before the Battle. Nick, we're going to have that on.
For sure. Now, you can follow me on Twitter at NickUFC. Follow my website at MMA Junior written out _ that is at MMAJUNIOR _ check out my website, MMAjunior.co. That's MMAJR.co, of course. And we're having a huge contest on right now that ends tomorrow night at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. And it's really simple to enter. And the winner gets 2 tickets to UFC 192, Cormier versus Gustafsson. So you got to enter that if you're driving distance from Houston. It'll be a fantastic card. You have fights like Hendricks Woodley. You have Bader Evans. So many great fights on that. So definitely check out the contest. You only have one more day, not even a day, to enter. So go do that now. Of course, my podcast, my weekly podcast, MMA Junior Radio, hosted weekly by me and John King. Sometimes John King, of course. This past week, we had a special co-host, a filler, and that was this man right here, Daniel Levy. So he came on 15-20 minutes in the intro to co-host with me, and then we had Marlon Vera. Very fun interview, coming off that win over Roman Salazar, and we had Spencer Kite, who is a contributor to UFC.com and The Province. Really 2 fantastic guests, so check that out if you haven't. One more little announcement. We just locked up a sponsorship deal with Unique Kennels. They provide the best bulldogs. They're a fantastic breeding company, so definitely check them out for sure. So I think that's about it. So once again, thanks to you guys for coming on, and enjoy the fights.